COVID, and now Mayor John Tory is pushing forward to make it 1 million. We have asked the LCMLCA for people to those sites and register on the bridge system in the city of Toronto to 60 years old. The mayor says the city would welcome people that young into its mega vaccination sites basically right now if the province can update its online appointment booking system that quickly. Right now, the software is set to only certain age groups, and the province has to change the booking system to allow people as young as 60 to book in Toronto. Now, details about all this will be announced as soon as possible, says the mayor, but he's already spoken with Premier Doug Ford, and Tory says the Premier is saying yes to this change. All this as the city's top doctor continues to sound an urgent alarm over the spread of COVID, saying if this is a race, the variants are ahead by a mile.
The current number of cases screened positive for variants of concern is 800 since Monday.
Both Dr. Eileen Davila and Mayor John Tory say a family gathering over the Easter long weekend is simply not worth trading for possibly months more of lockdowns and risk to people's health. Reporting live, I'm Mark Douglas.
This portion of the news brought to you by Butler Mortgage. It's one of the largest biomanufacturing investments in Canadian history. It should help us for the next pandemic.
This new facility is being developed in Toronto by French drug maker Sanofi Pasteur and will help the country build up our domestic capacity to produce vaccines. This after being caught with barely any options through the COVID-19 health crisis. Innovation Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne says the new facility will mainly focus on influenza shots, but it will also have the tools to fill and finish other vaccines on a mass scale.
We need to have a strong Canadian biomanufacturing sector. I think everyone would agree with that across our nation, so that when the next pandemic hits, whatever it might be, we will be prepared as a nation.
The plant won't be operational until 2026. Sanofi is investing $455 million, while the feds are pumping in $415 million, and the government of Ontario is chipping in $55 million. The project will create or maintain more than 1,200 jobs. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
The province's education minister is insisting April break will be going ahead. As for when it's over, Stephen Lecce says protective measures will be ramped up to keep COVID from spreading.
We're not going to be reintegrating students back into schools without a heightened level of vigilance on that date. So as I've committed to before, we'll bring forth a plan that will highlight and underscore improved safety measures and access to testing that will reduce any potential case entering into our schools. That is the commitment we're making.
Lecce says the plan at the moment is to have students return to in-class learning after spring break.
Coming up next, another big move at the pumps. This is 680 News. Every day in Canada, 3,000 mortgages renew. Important announcement. If your mortgage renews in the next 90 days, contact butlermortgage.ca. 1.15.
They have 12,000 empty spaces in their vaccine scheduling system, and they can't update it because of the province.
Wow. Okay. Okay, Mr. Liddy. Wow. But he passed the 90. Went peacefully. Who knew? And he never did. This is his great source of pride that he never ratted out or squealed on any of the operatives in that whole Watergate break-in. Never turned on Nixon when everybody else was jumping ship. And oh dear. So it was a great story insofar as, I guess, drama south of the border is concerned. They got so much of it. You know what else they got a lot of? They got a lot of vaccines. I'm just impressed. Although it's kind of getting out of control there too. We've got that same situation happening here, but we don't have the vaccines.
So imagine they got blocked off the internet until the second the fucking thing ended. Just incredible timing. Incredibly coincidental. Dollarama dividend is going up 7%, and for some reason they're promising share buybacks. I don't know what their reasoning is. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why would you waste that money? Why would you waste that money? Let somebody else who's unless you're planning on going private. Why would you do that? Are you planning on taking our money away? We don't like that.
Japan, Korea, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. With your help, we will build back better for every child.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
Hi, my name is Camila. I'm 5. I live in Cairo, Egypt. Today, I'm going to show you my day in the lockdown.
strawberry.
have my breakfast here and it's your sometimes.
Breakfast, bitch.
I like to do yoga after that.
Starving kids.
Sometimes I'm a
That's where I
superhero.
got that from. We've heard this 1,000, 4 or 5 times.
I'm a princess.
Warranted. But he also promised at the same time that come next Monday, a week from Monday actually, April 12th, you would be allowed to open up if you're a small business. Hair salons, tattoo parlors, that kind of thing. Personal care services. And believe it, these people have been, well, they're dying on the vine. You've seen probably all of the
Was that a reference to
signs on
migrant workers?
storefronts
Was that
and
a
everywhere that
reference
these
to
places have
migrant? No,
been.
just be straight up.
They're
Don't make these
decimated.
sideways
And
little slanted
when it
fucking
comes to
remarks.
hoping that they be given just a sniff of potential rehabilitation and
Whoa,
opening,
what
this
the
may be
fuck are we
snuffed out
talking
sooner
about?
than it's allowed to go into operation on the 12th. We heard on the news and otherwise that
I don't know why
the
they
school
did
break's
it.
going
30
ahead.
minutes
April
on the
12th,
show.
there's
I don't
going to
know
be
why
that
they care
week
what I'm
off.
doing. You can find all
We
this
talked
shit
about it
yourself.
yesterday, whether or
You
not
really
the
want to
teachers
do
will
it.
get
I
their wish,
recommend
the
listening
unions
to the whole
anyway,
city's
to
fucking
extend
today.
online learning after the break because they don't think going back into the school system is appropriate. It's become increasingly a concern for more spread. It's kind of happening. Yes, there is greater spread there now, but I still maintain kids are safest in school, and that's best for them in the long range because getting out of school is no great help. It may work in some isolated cases, maybe where parents have the wherewithal to help the kids out and so on and so forth, but on balance, it's the wrong move. Anyway, when it comes to these health concerns, I'm believing that this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem with the ICUs filling up, even to the point where the head of the Ontario Hospital Association, Dr. Anthony Dale, he was saying that it's the most serious situation the government's encountered during the pandemic. And 421 in the ICUs is a high watermark during the entire last 12 months and change. So we're now into kind of uncharted territory, and if you believe the modeling, this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse before we actually exit this because the vaccines are delayed, or they're inappropriate, or we're not having a critical mass. You know, somebody pointed out earlier this morning, I thought this was rather instructive. When you've got 15% of the population under 18, you know, to get to herd immunity, you need about 70 to 80% with this thing, we're told.
Oh, who told you that?
Vaccine hesitancy.
Who told
you know that those numbers are kind of
they're all
inordinately
referencing
high,
each other
which
in a
gives us
circle.
more pause for concern. But
City of Toronto,
combined
the
with the
United
younger
Nations says
people,
we're
where
the
the
best
spread
place
is
in the
now
world to live.
also happening,
Go in
not to the
circles
same
trying to find
extent.
this
They're more
quote.
resilient,
Never
younger
happened.
people are, but still, this herd immunity thing may not be achieved.
It's not a thing.
I'm a
It's
little
theory
concerned about
somebody
that.
came up with
Although we're told now
60
Pfizer
years
has
ago. It's never happened
been
anywhere
testing
yet.
a vaccine for those under the age of 18,
Russia's vaccinating
and they're rather
pets.
positive about it. In fact, they believe that this is 100% effective. It's actually kids 12 to 15. It's Moderna that's testing the ones who are 6 months to 12 years of age, and Johnson & Johnson testing 12 to 17-year-olds. It's a furious race to see who can come out with the vaccine for children. And if it's effective, well, the one certainly for the 12 to 15-year-olds that's been done in the States, 100% effective. But only 2,200 kids were tested, so it's a small sample. Nonetheless, it's a positive development. Then the question becomes, will kids get vaccinated? Will the parents allow for that? Or want to promote that? And who knows? So in the interim, we're left to wonder, where are we going as far as...
It's not that it's a small sample, it's one trial.
Together,
We'll do
but
6
now
more
can't
today
because of
the
COVID-19.
results they want. Oh.
may be
You're taking us to
counterproductive.
be every person in your
But
village.
on the other hand, if we can deter the number of people going into ICUs, so we free up these units,
build a
or at
pyramid
least
out of
leave the capacity
shipping
available to people needing surgeries that are obviously lifesavers, cancers. You know, people with leukemias and what. This is why I'm concerned. If Doug Ford, he's got to make a call on this. He's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. Tomorrow, when he has to make the pronouncement, I'm sure he's going to disappoint somebody in the equation.
Which is to give you medical care, the province has to pay for it. But if you die,
can he afford to pull the emergency brake at this point? Can he afford not to?
They can't fucking breathe it.
And you know, the other thing that we're seeing with the vaccines, and we're going to talk about this before the hour's out, actually at the bottom of the hour, there's a lawyer who's representing 2 retired doctors here in the province of Ontario. And they filed notice. It's not a suit per se, but they're, the clients for this lawyer these retired doctors, they both got the vaccine in early March. But at the time when they signed on, they were told within 21 days they would get their booster shot, the second shot. In the interim, that got changed to a 4-month interval by the Public Health Agency of Canada, as well as NAZI, that's the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations. And they said, nah, you know what, 4 months is okay. Well, that's not what the pharmaceuticals are saying. Moderna says 28 days between booster shots. And for Pfizer, it's 21. And they feel that their health is being compromised. And I think there are a lot of people out there who might have gotten the initial shot, and now they're waiting, got that second appointment booked, because it happens at the first appointment, 4 months out. I mean, do you feel your health is being compromised? As I said, this is not a lawsuit per se. It's not a class action suit. It may actually set the table for it or pave the way. I'll ask the lawyer. Bottom of the hour, he's coming up. But still, when it comes to health considerations, there is a lot in play right now. It's nice to see there were 90,000 shots given out in the province yesterday. We're going to need to do that, and then some, at a clip like that, every day, 7 days a week, to get to everybody having at least one shot by Canada Day. If my math is more or less correct, it's a scary scenario, and the waiting is the hardest part. Tom Petty said that, but I just repeated it. And this is where we get into a point of Doug Ford having to make a call for tomorrow. And my question to you, as we open things up before I get to the lawyer representing on these two doctors who want to be made whole, and they want to do it now, and they feel like they've been given the quick whistle here. Out of the pool, your turn is coming up 4 months hence. They're not buying. And I'm just wondering how you feel about that. But more importantly, when it comes to the overall health care and consideration of patients, when you've got ICUs filling up faster than we can maintain, a certain capacity, because beyond just the numbers, it's a case of staff shortages, I'm told, from the Ontario Hospital Association, the fatigue element that set in with the personnel that are there. And this is why the alarm bells seem to be ringing in the medical profession for the most part. And some are saying the emergency brake has to be pulled. Does it? Do you believe that now, in this 11th hour of a dire predicament, if we subscribe to that, there are some people who believe that, no, this is all just being alarmist unnecessarily so. Let's not be scaremongering. Everybody go about their business, we'll be fine. I don't know, unless the head of the Ontario Hospital Association is puffing things up for his own gratification. I don't think so. He says it's the most serious situation the government's encountered during the pandemic. So here we are in the third wave, and there are difficult calls that have to be made. I'm asking you to make one right now, just on the idea that maybe on a two-part question, whether or not you've already had the initial vaccine. Only 310,000 people have had both doses in this province. Many, over I guess 2 million now, have had the single shot, but waiting in the interval. Is that something that gives you pause?
Socialism.
That is important because coronavirus is spreading around the world and also in this country. But when coronavirus is over, we'll be free again.
It's never going to be over, kid.
40-60歲咧，即係呃人嗰啲咧，最中意就話而家啲後生仔呢樣唔得啊嘛，又唔鬧得啊嘛。咁我成日都話咧，其實又唔係話一定㗎。首先點解咁
France announced a fresh national lockdown with most shops and schools closing for several weeks. This is News Hour, live from the BBC in London. I'm Tim Franks. This time last week, Islamist militants in Mozambique launched a large and vicious assault on the northern coastal town of Palma. Dozens were killed, thousands forced to flee. The militants, who claim allegiance to the Islamic State group, said that they've taken control of the whole town, which is close to a new multi-billion-dollar gas project where hundreds of foreigners work. In the past 24 hours, though, the military in Mozambique say that they're carrying out an operation to retake Palma. Paul Fauvet is the editor of the English language service at the state-funded Mozambique news agency and spoke to me from the capital, Maputo.
The military say they're in control of most of the town, but fighting has certainly been continuing up until yesterday. The Mozambique military is doing much better in Palma than it did in some of the other towns attacked. The Islamists did not drive them out, unlike what happened in other places like in Batapaya or Macamia. So the military is now putting up a much better fight than it did late last year, for instance. The military says it is now trying to flush out the Islamists who feared to be mixing in with what remains of the local population. Mind you, much of the population has run away during the fighting. There are now thousands of people took refuge in the bush or in nearby towns or even going up northwards towards the Tanzanian border.
Just in terms of the longer-term fight against the insurgents, we spoke to a man called Lionel Dyke earlier this week. He runs the Dyke Advisory Group. I'm sure you're aware of him. He runs this private security group that's been contracted by the government to help him in the fight against the militants. He said that the army wasn't involved at all in the fight against the militants until Sunday, some days after this attack took place. And in his words, it's under-equipped and very demoralized, and the leadership has no experience of this, in other words, of counterinsurgency. Do you think that that's a reasonable portrayal of the Mozambican military?
Well, the information that we've been receiving here is not that. It's clear from the stuff that that's been coming through in Mozambican media that the military was involved in the fighting from last Wednesday onwards. And Lionel Dyke's group come in with helicopter support, which has been important. I think he's exaggerating when he says that there's no military leadership in Mozambique. What we have seen is a shake-up in the military leadership. President Nyusi changed the military leadership a month or so ago, and this may have strengthened the backbone of the armed forces.
In the longer run, what do you think can be done to try and give the people there some sense of security? I mean, you mentioned that thousands have fled. Obviously, Palma is also close to this enormous gas project run by Total, which is hugely important to Mozambique and the region. Lots of foreign workers there as well. I mean, this level of violence that we've seen, it's presumably very, very important to the Mozambican government that they get a handle on it. How confident do you think they are that that can be done?
You're right. It's important for the Mozambican economy to get the natural gas liquefaction plant built. And if ISIS, the Islamic State, succeeds in stopping the construction of the liquefaction plants, then that's a very serious blow indeed to Mozambique's future economic prospects. So certainly the government wants to get the security situation under control. And Total has suspended its plans to resume work on the liquefaction plants. And clearly it would demand guarantees on security before it resumes.
Paul Fauvet, editor of the English language service of the state-funded Mozambique news agency. Spain has Western Europe's largest wolf population. There are about 2,000, mainly in the northwest of the country. Now the Spanish government has named the Iberian wolf an endangered species, meaning that its hunting will be banned. This move has been welcomed by environmental activists, but many farmers are fearful that their livestock will suffer an increase from wolf attacks.
Could you do something about we kill all these shelter dogs here for no reason? You got enough crazy North American dogs over there. Them wolves will think twice.
I'm standing next to a dam on the banks of the Duero River in the northern province of Zamora. But this river separates the northern part of Spain from the rest of the country. Until now, Spanish law has said that wolves can only be hunted north of this river, because that's where they're most prevalent. But if the changes to the law that are being prepared by the government are implemented, that will mean that wolves will no longer be able to be hunted at all. Felipe Cordesal has a farm north of the river. One night last November, wolves broke into a fenced field where he kept sheep, killing 11 animals outright. Another 36 sheep died in the following days from injuries and miscarriages triggered by the attack.
hemos tenido unos sobre 12, 14,000 euros de pérdida.
We lost 12 or 14,000 euros due to that attack.
How many sheep
When
did
it
you lose, you
happens to
bastards?
your heart sinks and you
The
think,
problem here is your
but
government
they're
won't give you
killing my
money for
animals,
loss.
which are my life and which provide a living for a lot
You
of
don't have
people.
that problem in Canada.
It's not even about the money. It's emotional because the animals are part
Shut
of
up.
my
If
family.
you had money, you could buy new stock
Farmers
or
in
whatever
northern
you need.
Spain do not receive state compensation for wolf attacks,
What
although
did I
further
just
south
say it
they
was
do.
about? Okay,
According
hold
to
on a
official
second.
figures, nearly 4,000 sheep and cows were killed by wolves in this region in 2019. Felipe believes the government's proposal to ban all hunting of wolves will see attacks increase further. In this recent protest, livestock owners drove into the city of Valladolid on tractors, demanding the government's wolf protection plan be withdrawn. Local people are familiar with this issue. I'm in favor of wolves being hunted in order to regulate their numbers. The wolves should be counted, their numbers regulated, by having them hunted so that they don't cause as much damage.
Habría que tener en cuenta the different sectors which are affected have to be taken into account, and the livestock farmers are heavily affected. But I think the wolves should be protected.
Meanwhile, conservationists have been celebrating the decision to ban the hunting of wolves.
Keep them away from the livestock, right? Hold on. Wrong plan. That's plan B. That's plan B.
I'm on my way north to the province of Palencia, where I'm going to meet with Juan Carlos Blanco, who is a biologist and one of the most respected wolf experts in Spain.
The wolves are very important from an ecological point of view. For example, in Spain, the wild ungulates, roe deer, red deer,
fish you're not supposed to kill. Oh, we did it by accident. Do we have the inside parts? Yeah.
And they are causing a lot of damage to
Kill
agriculture.
what else was
And they produce a lot of accidents on the roads. And in addition, they transmit diseases to the livestock. Yeah. And the wolf is controlling these wild ungulates.
Juan Carlos believes the government needs to negotiate with local authorities and livestock breeders to soften the blow of the new law.
If you had these
In the meantime, the conundrum pitting wolves against farmers is set to continue.
Broke in. Hey, what kind of fence you got? I want to see this guy's fence.
The sound of wolves. Appreciating Guy Hedgeco's reporting from northern Spain. Talking of wolves, on Twitter, I have appealed for help. There's a tweet that I've retweeted at BBC from the Chinese embassy in Ireland, which involves some sort of wolf metaphor that I've read several times and am unable to comprehend. I'm sure it's just me being thick, but if you can help, do reach out to me, as they say, on Twitter. This is Musa.
Distribution of the BBC World Service News Hour in the U.S. is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio.
70 percentile range. So 4 weeks in old people, it falls to the 30% percentile. And after that, let's say we waited 6 weeks, nobody knows.
Do you actually work at the long-term care home, or they just call you doctor when they bring you your
That's a point well taken.
lie
I'm
to
going to
us.
ask the lawyer here as well, because I think that's a consideration for the two doctors he's representing as plaintiffs in his case. Keep listening. Albert, appreciate you weighing in from Thunder Bay. Thanks for it. Have a great long weekend. It's coming up shortly after tomorrow. John and Port Perry, let's get you in here under the wire. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Most of the time, Mr. Lupley, you're always right. The two previous callers, number one, I don't trust the government. They would be held criminally responsible if they did this sort of antics with delaying the second dose. It's obscene. I can't believe it. Number two, there are a number of people I know who have gotten their first dose and they're so relieved that they're ignoring the second dose. They figure, well, I'm halfway there, thank goodness. the fear that this nonsense is instilled in people is palpable. The last thing, speak to the ICU stuff. I look at the websites that hospitals publish occupancy of their ICU, Georgetown, Billington, Holton, etc., etc. Look around. I know you guys have checked downtown Toronto, but if you look at those ICUs, they're not full by any means. And that just, you know, when you
what are you
say
talking about?
50%
Hold on.
of the occupants of ICUs are COVID sufferers, if two people showed up and one of them was a COVID sufferer, that's 50%. I don't believe it. I've lost confidence. And dear, my goodness, John, those poor people have had their first dose. They're 80 years old and they get told it's beyond 16 weeks. I would go hunting for the criminals responsible for that. I'm angry beyond words.
No, I appreciate you sharing the anger on the matter of the ICUs. You may be right. We're really hyper-focused on Toronto or the immediate area where the ICUs, when you say, you know, two patients show up, one is a COVID patient. Trouble is that COVID patient, increasingly, if those numbers go up, they're taking from somebody who else has to come in for cancer treatment and would need time in the ICU and recovery, and they're not getting it. There are stories now well documented about people who have had these surgeries canceled on them at the last minute. And that's unconscionable. And there are reports as well, patients are now being transferred to other area hospitals because some of the downtown ones don't have the capacity. And not just the capacity, but it's staffing that's become a problem. Shortages in staffing.
Street sweeper today.
Fatigue's been cited, so I'll just leave it at that based on the information that I've gleaned from various sources. I did want to come around to let me grab one last call, and then we'll get to the lawyer representing on the plaintiffs, two retired doctors. The shots 4 months apart, they're not buying it, and they're proceeding legally. So, Lisa, you're the last word on this one. Go ahead, your turn.
Hi, so I'm in my 20s, and I'm in healthcare, and I've had my first dose. And I also got the email about the extension, and I don't know. I just want to know if it's arbitrary or science-based, and...
Well, let me tell you how it works.
The whole thing, I don't know.
It's based on modeling, and what they've said is,
you work in this, they got you so busy, you don't know what's going on.
The first shot, and then the second shot 3 weeks later, that gives you 95% immunity. The first shot alone would give you, let's say, 83, ballpark at 83. So if you get that first shot alone at 83%, and then you can extend out rather than getting that second shot to give you 95, you give the second shot to somebody else to get 83.
Said it was a 10 to 1 factor.
And therefore,
that's
yes, for you personally, there would be
8.3.
Less.
You fucked up 8.3 to 83, like I fucked up 40. The difference is nobody's listening to me.
Getting
the first time I
contracting the contagion, but they figure that on balance, more people would be kind of initially covered. That's their modeling. I'm hoping to explain it as well as I can, but they think that spreading the wealth,
Canadian province,
make sure that more people have a modicum of prevention rather than a smaller group that have a greater degree of protection. And that's what they've done through their modeling. And the person that has gotten the initial dose would like to say, hey, I'm in for a penny, I'm in for a pound. Give me the second one on the timeline the pharmaceuticals recommend. Their guidance says 21 days for Pfizer, 28 Moderna. And now that that's been altered, the pharmaceuticals aren't going along with it. But this is what the best practices or guidance coming from the Public Health Agency of Canada and the immunization people at NACI. I think a lot of people are right to be concerned and pissed. It does seem arbitrary to me. It almost seems political as well, that they just want to boast or the Trudeau government that, hey, we've got more people vaccinated. Look at these numbers. 5.5 million so far have at least got the first dose. Well, you know what? That's not good enough. I thank you, Lisa. I've got to move on because we've got the lawyer representing on the plaintiffs. He's coming up. He can address some of these concerns and questions, and he will in a moment on the Oakley Show. Global News Radio, 640 Toronto.
Spring is finally here, and Good Food cooked up a great deal for you. Get 8 free meals in your first 2 Good Food orders. That's 4 free meals per order. It's the perfect time to spruce up your dinner routine with our variety of easy recipes with fresh local ingredients. And get free contactless delivery. It doesn't...
I want to hear about this thing that happened in the Congo. You keep telling me about this kid that lives in Egypt that does yoga. I give a fuck.
And I applied.
You became a hydro worker, yes. A lineswoman person.
Nazreen is making her way to the next broken electricity pylon. Her husband works in the financial sector. He didn't have to join the army because he is an only son.
That's such a weird
They live in the province of Homs. Like so much of the country, it has been devastated by the war. Reconstruction is an enormous challenge. Millions of men
everybody's got these strange ethics.
Killed.
We're going to go kill off these people
are still
over there,
in the army or militias.
rules about it.
Without women in the workforce, Syria would collapse. Thousands of power pylons have been destroyed, and there's no end of work for Nazreen and her colleagues. And no end of criticism either.
Oh, he's got a bunch of brothers.
For religious conservatives, it's scandalous to see women in tight trousers climbing poles.
Tight trousers. No, it's trousers. Tight trousers. Baggy clothes.
Thank God I was able to get over the social stigma that says women can't. No, we can. A woman is as good as a man. We can help. I hope we overcome the idea that women can only do office work. We have to get out and deal with reality. And it's a great experience.
What is your electricity?
There's something special out here in the countryside. The family are going out for supper after a long day's work.
If you say McDonald's, I'm going to scream.
For Nazreen, it's important that her daughters learn to ignore conservative bigotry.
I'm proud of Mama. She works at home and outside. She has a great and difficult job.
Trying to sign up members.
I'm the one who encouraged my wife the most. For us, men and women are equal at work and elsewhere.
Nazreen worries about what will happen after the war, when the men come home from the army and want to go back to normal life.
They're going to be drunkards.
Will they turn back the clock on Nazreen and other working women?
When we started, there were just 1 or 2 of us. But now there are 20 women at the power company. They all work outdoors. It's a lovely experience. There are problems, but I think our numbers will grow.
Nazreen says women's time has come. They're irreplaceable when it comes to reconstruction. There is more than enough for everyone to do after 9 years of war in Syria.
Repression and discrimination are part of life for many women around the world. On our new Facebook channel, DW Women, you'll find stories about those taking a stand and inspiring others to do the same. DW Women gives a voice to the women of our world.
You're the ones who made that oil.
And now we head to Mexico, a country deemed to be one of the world's most dangerous. Last year, Mexico recorded 36,000 murders and 60,000 missing people. Most of the violence is linked to drug cartels, but it can also devastate the lives of those trying to be a force for good.
Twice as many people.
2019 saw 23 environmental activists killed. Their efforts to protect the country's plant and animal life got in the way of those whose priority is making a profit.
Amado Gomez takes care of his older brother's grave. Homero Gomez was an environmental activist. He disappeared on January the 13th and was later found dead.
He was our pillar of strength. He always encouraged and supported us. My brother was the greatest. I don't think you can ever get over such a loss. He'll always be in my heart, and I will always look up to him.
Homero Gomez was devoted to the cause of monarch butterflies. Many members of one subspecies migrate 5,000 kilometers from eastern North America to this corner of the Mexican state of Michoacan, where they spend the winter. They always manage to find the same area of lush forest across generations. In 2017, we came to visit Homero Gomez. He'd made it his life's mission to protect the monarchs.
It's amazing to host this natural wonder.
We're really proud that the world's largest colony comes here. It's unique. When we walk through the forest, it's an indescribable feeling. We protect them day and night. The butterflies have chosen an enchanted
$200
place.
face value Mi'kmaq butterfly. I think it's 0.55 ounces.
Why do the butterflies need protecting?
Whatever the
Because logging, much of it illegal, is devastating the forests of Michoacán. There's strong demand for timber from the US and China. Avocado growers want to clear more land. Gomez and his colleagues organized patrols to prevent illegal logging, which proved successful.
He had such good ideas to protect the butterflies and help our community. He started many projects. For example, he said, let's plant new trees. And we all agreed and said, yes, Homero, let's do that.
We did hear this part before. I want to hear
Trained, we would never have taken that first shot. We would have waited for further supply, for the guidance to change. And, we're stuck in our houses anyway. Because we don't think that we'll be fully protected. What's emerged subsequently is, as studies have come from other parts of the world, that whatever people think is appropriate in terms of protection based on the first shot, that for older and immunocompromised people, they don't mount the same antibody response. There's been a lot of writing on that subject.
I bet.
And that all of those people are potentially not as protected than if a young, healthy person got that first shot. And so what we're asking is that the provincial government changes its position and gives these people and all these similarly situated people their booster shot in the promised time frame, failing which
Anybody close to him suggesting that there could be a more nefarious reason for his symptoms?
Well, Navalny himself is very careful not to link his poisoning last year with his current problems. He says he suspects a trapped nerve.
Something else.
As things stand now, it's Navalny's word against the authorities' word. The Russian prison service isn't exactly known for being transparent, but it's true that it has faced accusations of prison abuse for decades, and the jail which Navalny is serving his sentence is seen as one of the harshest in Russia.
And has the prison service itself responded to these accusations of Navalny?
Yes, within the past couple of hours, they said that Mr. Navalny is being provided with proper medical care, and as for being woken up, the prison service said that the guards are merely doing their job, checking that all inmates are there.
Is this the sort of thing that will get traction, do you think, in Russia, or, have the authorities not just imprisoned Navalny, but also, managed to clamp down on his presence and his publicity within the country?
He's definitely not being forgotten, although his absence has highlighted an important driving force behind opposition activity in Russia. There was a string of protests earlier this year, shortly after he was put behind bars, but these protests, they sort of petered out. Now his supporters say they'll hold another major wave of protests once 500,000 people sign up via a website. But so far, they've got 360,000 people, so it's not currently clear what was going to happen in terms of the Russian opposition next.
Vitaly Shevchenko, thank you very much, as ever. We've had a new glimpse today into the final hours of George Floyd with surveillance footage from a shop where Mr. Floyd allegedly tried to buy a pack of cigarettes with a fake $20 bill last year.
Tried to, or did the guy
police in Minneapolis to be called, and it was then that the white police officer Derek Chauvin knelt for more than 9 minutes on Mr. Floyd's neck. The footage from inside the shop was played for the first time today on day 3 of Derek Chauvin's trial for the murder of George Floyd. Correspondent Barbara Blatt-Usher is following events from just outside the courthouse in Minneapolis. Barbara, what has struck you today about the proceedings?
Well, what struck me is what's happened actually in the last hour or so. We had a witness, a 61-year-old man, Charles McMillan, who saw the police pinning Mr. Floyd to the ground and had actually called out to Mr. Floyd at the time, look, just don't resist, get in the car, you know, once the police have you, you just need to go along with them, trying to help him. And the video was shown, never before seen video, I think, body cam images of that arrest, very intense and close up of Mr. Floyd on the ground calling for his mother. And this witness, Mr. McMillan, just broke down. He put his head on the stand and sobbed, quite dramatic actually. And he said to the court that he just really felt helpless. And I've been struck that almost every witness so far has cried at some point. Because I think of the trauma that they saw, but also because some of them have said they did feel powerless to help Mr. Floyd and to intervene.
Yeah, it has been remarkable to see the number of witnesses have been overcome. I mean, given that, you know, we think that, however awful it is, that in a sense that terrible video footage has become rather familiar. What did we learn from this new surveillance footage from inside the shop?
The prosecution showed that, I think, just to give us a sense of what Mr. Floyd's behavior was like just before his encounter with the police. So we saw on the video him going into the store. He seemed to be quite relaxed. He was shown chatting and laughing with shoppers and employees. He moved around the store. He did a little dance at one point. And we were sort of guided through it by the store clerk, Christopher Martin, who dealt with him. Mr. Martin said that he appeared to be high on a drug, that he struggled to finish his sentences at times, and that's why Mr. Martin felt that was the case, although he was able to have conversations with him, had a brief discussion about sports and so on. And this was, of course, the moment when the event happened that triggered the police coming, which was the $20 bill that Mr. Floyd was thought to be counterfeit, and the clerk that was interviewed, that was the witness, was the one who called him on the counterfeit bill. So we got a lot more detail about what went on before the police were called. And actually, again, regret from the clerk, because he said at the end, if he hadn't flagged that, then Mr. Floyd might still be alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's not germane to the course of the trial, but it just goes to show how the people who were caught up in this have just, you know, are still living with the trauma.
Yes. That's very much the case, and that's something I think that the trial is revealing that maybe onlookers might not have expected. And, you know, that you would think also that this has to impact the jury as well, because we're now for the third straight day not only seeing more images of Mr. Floyd before he was arrested, but also the arrest itself and the restraint itself from each time from a different angle. And this is very much obviously a prosecution strategy to drive home all aspects of that very traumatic event and that very forceful event for the jury before the defense has its chance to take over and give its version of what happened.
Barbara Pledge-Usher, outside the courthouse in Minneapolis, thank you very much.
This was working before, what happened?
Yo, murder, who the hell turned up? Tim Westwood, put your blanket them, Tim me, murder, me never have peace, me make a black tape, come on, jump in the black sheep, so black, look, oh God, the sucker to say, the niggas can't play, no way, the shit he plays, I keep the sex, sex to black queen, to England, and everything the linger sing, what we bringin', it's the demon in a peanut for the music, move your country on the music, we just choose it, still burn the flag, cause I'm on that rebel shit, the level kick, pin the bloody ass, yeah, pass me the trash, to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, good, go on, yeah, red, what, hold it down, hold it down, hold it down, let the president hold it down, say Westwood, that's fun to crazy. I turn a diamond 5 foot kicks, hits and Westwood whip. What the DJs on the mix, that ain't all that hip. So don't skip the dial, my niggas, that's fine. Now you can't get the chance to guess new music in that style. He's scratching, put him black and blue, bruise over bruise and crashes. No wonder I tune radio show, jams, foes get slammed on the dirt. Bow! Ooh, it hurts so bad when I smile. Because the honest from the crowd. Suave and joke, you know now. The nigga break is falling down, money falling down, money falling down. The nigga break is falling down. Westwood is getting crazy. Marvelous off of red. Cha-cha-cha. Now it's time to get live. The Westwood's the best. Come on. Feel the vibrations from the station. The pumping frustrations in the nation. The bridge is falling down. They falling down. They falling down. The bridge is falling down. Another house with the if you rep the team down, know you'll set me high. Big shots, nigga, rep your block. Bad man, best be holding your tongue. The bloody north where the soldiers is from. If you rep the team down, know you'll set me high. Big shots, nigga, rep your block. If you ain't the bad man, best be holding your tongue. The bloody north where the soldiers is from.
3, 5, 7s and Mac 11s. He stepping, cock your weapon and stop yelling if you rep 187. I got niggas in the front ready and ready to split you down the middle just like a blunt. So walk but not with me. The Lord will not forgive me for shaking up your kidney. Cause you faking and Disney. My niggas lippy and shifty, pissy, really iggy, shiggy. We don't give a wiggy. What really, Millie's trying to kill the city like crack in the 80s. I'm ready to burn in Hades. My dog's infected with rabies. Not even my barber can fade me. You niggas is crazy. Fuck up, fight and learn what these talents do. You can be as cuckoo as you want. I'm unbalanced too. Facing the garden, I'm coming to rally you. Massive and splatter you. Run you off of your avenue while I laugh at you. The chronics are dizzy, demented rocks. My pigment, under appearance, igneous. Run you up the district.
If you rep the team down, know you'll set me high. Big shots, nigga, rep your block. Bad man, best be holding your tongue. The bloody north where the soldiers is from. If you rep the team down, know you'll set me high. Big shots, nigga, rep your block. You ain't the bad man, best be holding your tongue. The bloody north where the soldiers is from. Star City with me blast shots. Then in the last block, your man mentality. Cause all of us niggas ass rocks. I'm big game harvesting, feeling cash crops. Money growing trees, just turn the coke, leave the crack rock. Find a block, get a key, you keep it padlocked. And it's the animals, watch your dog, jealous rats talk. We pack blocks, smoke weed, we head like Sasquatch. Fuck my niggas, dog, your son to take you out of the sandbox. Better yet, I crash your plane, spit on the black box. Because he's highly trained on cocaine, higher for that plug, me that hard. You with more clips is, for instance, the same equivalent as a bed nail in the insects. It's dickless. Most cats is sweet like licorice. I eat they cool fast, smoke niggas similar to cigarettes. You dig me yet? Better catch me, burn the ass. I belong to burn the fast, bleed you colder than the Inuit. You rep the team down, know you'll set me high. Big shots, nigga, rep your block. Bad man, best be holding your tongue. The bloody north where the soldiers is.
Tell me it's all for the good, but I know that they're telling me lies. These niggas, they trying to disguise their hate in their eyes when I arrive. And they thought I was really gonna lose, so they all give it up for the wise. Real ass nigga don't run, fake ass nigga gon' hide. They would tell me it's all for the good, but I know that they telling me lies. These niggas, they trying to disguise their hate in their eyes when I arrive. And they thought I was really gonna lose, so they all give it up for the wise. Yeah, I'ma fly to the stars on my first one. But trust me, it won't be the last one. I'm upgrading my girlfriend the last one. I think I just put a fast one. When I came in, I won't get your crib. Yo, bitch, she dressed, she damn. You so pathetic, my nigga. Get it together, my nigga. Need my money stretched out. Old hubble bubble. Your ass two-faced. Talk about double trouble. See right through that shit. I'ma go through the honors and pop your bubbles. Claim you solid like some concrete, but that shit still crumble. You be wishing I stop it, don't you? You see me, you wait till I drop it, don't you? You wanna see me perform it, don't you? Hating you love me, don't you? That shit LOL. Niggas take LOLs. So many fake out here. Like that shit for sale. Real ass nigga don't run. Fake ass nigga gon' hide. You ever tell me it's all for the good? Well, I know that they telling me lies. These niggas, they trying to disguise. They hate in their eyes when I arrive. They thought I was really gon' lose. So they all give it up for the wise. Real ass nigga don't run. Fake ass nigga gon' hide. They would tell me it's all for the good. But I know that they telling me lies. These niggas, they trying to disguise. They hate in their eyes when I arrive. They thought I was really gon' lose. So they all give it up for the wise.
More sirens. There's a lot of emergency calls today. That's a fire truck and there's people in the way.
Fresh out the clink and I'm back, don't sell them. West side up here, rolling with the click of no felons. No felon wanna do to get my fucking cash on, mash on, black bucket lows, get your ass on. Left on my feet, no feds, no chases, no lead, no cases, no bled, no faces, those dead, no traces. You don't wanna try me, no patience, no patience. Headed to the IC.
Hey, what do you want?
Most people are telling myself what I want to do.
As I see it, it's one of it's a concept.
I'm over here fucking with TF Traveling from Florida. I'm on a block right now. Tricky. Stay on the phone.
Hey, fuck y'all. Hey, my arm hurts.
How you doing?
All right.
Bro. Come on, chill.
I gotta go back to my house. For what? I ain't did nothing.
You ain't even looking for me. What I do? Got the gun? It's a wrap.
I might die for this shit, nigga. All them homicides was on Trippz, nigga. Gang banging that Trippz shit. Niggas calling up cause of them blue shades. My peoples, they was right behind, and they no nigga pulling up in no new rave. It was cool to that gang raid. Now these tough guys just never act right. Blood can fill a whole bathtub. Let these blood brothers get baptized. Blacklisted on the bad guy. Plus some dark skin, so I'm the black guy. Never see me like black ice. And we still pack cannons at shack sites. Niggas swear they the man. But the light skin brother like, when did we get to Niggas say you in the can. Try to kill him on the chat, let the people still chop him up. I ain't trust anybody that'll walk around. Pop kind, only reason that they poppin' out. Niggas skins on my shoes like crocodiles. They know they fucking with me like a crocodile. Gang, 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 gang. Yelling that shit that you never been a part of. I know niggas I got money for the starter. Big roads and they ain't even for the gutter. No one person goes out for the city, got a mainstream level. Talk about the top of that's product. Tell me if you ever seen a bike that is hotter. Knock me up mad that I got it. TCP relay, the nigga just a product. Think you styling like you could just see him in his product. Big gun bust from a nigga look a manga. Party next door, need a shot nigga in a pocket. Tell Jay Prince, I don't give a fuck, yo. Something for a rap with a cut, though. Just quitting in a round and a touch flow. But they ain't really keep it on the hush, though.
I'm blued up, I'm crewed up. For the F43G, I'm shoot up. Any nigga that really want it, I'ma find it. 32 shots, 10 skeletons up the closet. You don't wanna be back down with your belly up. 4 double law niggas hopping on the heavy truck. We give bullets, but niggas don't give any fucks. Mac ain't auto, but I'll show you how to semi-buck. Type of strap, you may need to get rid of me. Really take headshots, so who's guillotine? You ain't know I really bang in these streets. Got heat from the west, but I'll bang in the east. Nigga, crip, 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 crip. I rep a gang that you never been a part of. I put that on my mother and I put that on my daughter. If you just one of my brothers, then your blacks get a shot up. I'm like Welvin, yelling out God him. So you ain't gotta ask Biggie Smalls who shot him. I got a Biggie pump, got a perk when I pop up. Had to move work in the slums just to guap up. Now I hit the club till the bartender top up. The stocks well, so for lock, you'll get shot up. Now I hit the club till the bartender top up. The stocks well, so for lock, you'll get shot up.
I might die for this shit, nigga. All them homicides was on.
Welcome to Mi'kmaq Matters, a podcast about Mi'kmaq people, politics, land, and water. I'm Glenn Wheeler.
We burned down somebody's shit today or not?
Damn, son, where'd you find?
Yeah.
Oh, this would be the last of my stories today. It could be classic if we discovered what
Hi, I'm Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. The response has been overwhelming. People are demanding 4 Max and Stacy's per week. Kaiser Report.
And, you know,
too slow. This is almost gone. More signage.
Taps into it. Like if we're not trying, every time someone plays, I notice my actions, everything is connected to the song. Yeah, it's weird.
What are you talking to me? Look at the price of the jeans. I got no time for a tease. No time for a tease. Money is all that I breathe. I got my tricks on my sleeve. I bet you beat up a freak. I just came out of the womb. Need to be speaking my truth. You never stepped in my shoes. I'm pulling up in a fuel. Niggas don't know what to do. I'm taking all of the loot. I got my feet on the bay. We can be sleeping all day. I got the blood in my veins. I got more gold on my chain. Nigga, I'm going insane. I'm taking all of the hate.
With COVID, the variants are ahead
like a ghost. I keep my ducks in the row.
encourage safety measures and access to testing. Those measures will include deep cleaning of the schools, additional testing, and one symptom screening.
where students will have to
You
stay
put
home and get
ventilation in
tested
these
even if
schools,
they
the
have only
percentage of
one
schools that don't
symptom
have
of COVID-19.
mechanical
Dave Woodard,
ventilation.
Global News.
What's the word?
The provincial and federal
I said
governments have been
pressurized, 'cause that's
pointing
what it is.
fingers
It's
over
either
who is
negative
to
or
blame for the
positive pressure.
shortfalls
That's
in the
like
COVID-19
pressure,
vaccine rollouts. Premier
Oh,
Doug
but
Ford
the
has said
teachers, they
more
don't need to
supply
do
is
that.
needed, while Ottawa says the shots are already here. Well, the two sides had to appear together to make an announcement in Toronto this morning, and we got the chance to put them on the spot.
I'm not going to start wedging on a great announcement us against the federal government. Are we going to have, as a big family, a few differences? Sure we are.
Days are getting brighter by the day in terms of access for vaccines, and jurisdictions
My brain
are
is like,
working
I don't want to
as
take
hard
my
as
shoe
they
off
can
and
to
put
get
it
them
back
into arms
on.
as quickly as
What is like,
possible.
there's been a piece of
As
glass
for
in
the
here for
Toronto
3 days,
announcement
eh?
being made, it has to do with Made in Canada vaccines, an opportunity that the country has missed out on entirely this pandemic. Thanks to $470 million in investments being made by the Ontario and federal governments, that won't be an issue for the next pandemic. French drug maker Sanofi is to build a new influenza vaccine facility in North York by 2026.
This facility will help us meet growing demand for domestic flu vaccines, specifically for populations at greater risk of influenza.
Once completed, the plant could produce enough vaccine doses to support Canada's entire population within 6 months of a global influenza strain pandemic being declared. First place is on the line tonight in the NHL's All-Canadian North Division. The Maple Leafs are visiting the Jets. Toronto sitting 1 point up on second place Winnipeg, but also has a game in hand on the Jets. The Raptors are also on the road tonight facing the Oklahoma City Thunder, but Toronto has lost 12 of its last 13 games and the past 3 in a row. Your weekend weather always in view at 640toronto.com, and taking a look at the forecast from the Global News Weather Center. Some sun peeking through this afternoon, but it is going to become cloudy overnight. The temperature dropping below freezing before morning, and it won't warm up much tomorrow either. The high at just +1, cloudy and windy too. Looking like a beautiful sunny day for Friday, warming only slightly, high of +4. It's 10 degrees in downtown Toronto. I'm Brianna Cart.
Things like the number of deaths were exaggerated, the vaccine causes polio, and the vaccine will implant a microchip. A study conducted on behalf of the Ontario Medical Association found Ontarians ages 55 to 64 are the most engaged online across all COVID hoax topics, with men 52% and women at 48%. Now, the research found that in many cases, Ontario's COVID hoax theorists
Isn't that what they say the population? That's like the
population.
You're equally guilty, all of you there.
26% of misinformation came from one website. The OMA says it's not clear why this age group now is responsible for so much misinformation.
Which website was it?
But
We're all
it's
going to look it
concerning,
up.
given that many of them are now eligible for COVID vaccines. According to the OMA CEO, it's only by separating the facts from the fiction that we will make sound decisions that will protect us, our loved ones, and our communities. Phil Martino, 680 News.
In one of the largest biomanufacturing investments in Canadian history, the federal and provincial governments are partnering with a French pharmaceutical company to build a new vaccine manufacturing facility.
This project is worth nearly $1 billion and will see a new vaccine plant open in Toronto in 2026. The facility will be focused on producing influenza vaccines. However, it will also have the capacity to fill and finish other vaccines on a mass scale.
Modern, flexible biomanufacturing capacity within our borders.
The lack of domestic vaccine production has been a problem through the COVID-19 pandemic, but Innovation Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne says this project will address that for future health crises, and the federal government will cover a large share of the costs for this new plant.
With an investment of $415 million that will have an impact for generations to come.
Sanofi's investing $455 million, and Ontario's chipping in $55 million. The project will create or maintain more than 1,200 jobs. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Amtrak Gas next. There's a big move on the way.
Thanks for continuing to make us Toronto's #1 for breaking news, traffic, and weather.
On your radio, online, and on your smart speaker.
This is 680 News.
Gomez Appliances is proud to support the Canadian Cancer Society Daffodil campaign. Cancer has touched almost every Canadian family, including our own. This
Winter in the rearview mirror, as well as maybe greeting a spring with better prospects. hopefully, we will all see a brighter day forward. We're going to talk about that with Swifty and Potsy coming up at the bottom of the hour, the midweek roundtable, you know, on the idea of the vaccines. And there's a spat now between the feds and the province as to who's to blame for dropping the ball last hour. We highlighted the fact that, you know, this 4-month interval between doses is somehow a rationing, and who or what's responsible for that, whereas other countries don't seem to have that problem. It's because we didn't get vaccines in a timely fashion. And that was on the fence, I maintain. However, I did want to talk about other matters since last week. We had this big story of the Suez Canal being blocked up by the Ever Given, that colossal container ship. Interesting how the ship's got so big. You know, it really dials back to an episode that happened maybe a previous generation ago in the 6-Day War. And there's been currency lent to the book that is Stranded in the 6-Day War, whose author, Kath Sanker, has joined us on the line to explain where this was not unprecedented, actually, but there's even a more remarkable story attached to ships being stranded in the Suez Canal. Kath Sanker, it's good to have you on the Oakley Show this afternoon in Toronto. Good afternoon.
It's going to take 30 fucking minutes to get to that.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me on your show.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. As I said, you know, there's currency that's been lent to your book, which predated this whole thing with the Ever Given for sure. So you wrote about being stranded in the 6-Day War. How did this whole idea come about, or how did it come to your attention first off?
Well, it's fascinating, really. I actually saw an art exhibition by an artist called Uriel Orlo, and he had some images and some footage and photographs of his ship that was stranded in the middle of the Suez Canal. And I was fascinated. I mean, I have a history background and some knowledge of the history.
People giving one of them a hug and eventually buying those cigarettes. It's not remarkable video, really, until you realize that you're seeing last minutes of the life of this man who was a couple of days before. The prosecution seems to be trying to humanize Floyd because they expected the defense to attack Floyd's character, in part by focusing on his drug use. This cashier, Christopher Martin, testified that Floyd did seem to be under the influence of drugs at the store, but that he was friendly, that he was easy to deal with, and that they even talked about how Floyd had played football.
Well, we know that the store employees had called the police in the first place because Floyd had used a fake $20 bill in the store. So I'm curious, what did this cashier, Christopher Martin, what did he say now about accepting that bill?
Well, he said that when Floyd handed him that $20 bill, he knew instantly that it was fake. Cashiers at this store got their paychecks docked if they accepted fake bills. But the witness told defense attorney Eric Nelson that despite that, he decided to let Floyd pay with it, even though he had rejected a counterfeit bill from one of Floyd's friends earlier in the day.
Was that in part because you felt maybe he's under the influence?
Partially. The other person that had come in, it kind of seemed like he was trying to scheme, like he knew it was a fake bill. He was trying to get over. I thought that George didn't really know that it was a fake bill, so I thought I'd be doing him a favor.
He said that it was only after his store manager saw the bill and told him to go find Floyd in his car and ask him to come back into the store that he did that. And it was after Floyd twice refused to come back that one of his coworkers called the police.
And how did he describe what unfolded after that?
Well, Martin eventually ran outside to watch as Officer Chauvin held Floyd under his knee. And in surveillance video from outside of the store, we can see him sort of standing on the sidewalk, distressed. And Prosecutor Matthew Frank asked him about that.
We saw you standing there with your hands on your head for a while, correct? Good. What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief and guilt.
Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
In other words, he felt that the favor he'd tried to do for Floyd had backfired.
Yeah, I mean, this cashier, this man, Christopher Martin, he seems to be joining a number of witnesses who are feeling tremendous guilt about what happened to George Floyd.
Yeah, we've heard that from a lot of witnesses who testified this week. Another witness today was Charles McMillan, a bystander who watched Derek Chauvin pinning George Floyd down too, and who was urging Floyd to get up, get in the car, even though Floyd was pinned down. Today, one of the prosecutors played some of the video of Floyd's arrest for him, and this witness just broke down. Listen.
I know that this is difficult. Can you just explain sort of what you're feeling in this moment?
I feel helpless
have him, Mama. You just understand, you know.
That witness was not able to continue testifying, and the judge called for a short break in the trial.
That is NPR's Adrian Florido. Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, Elsa.
Robina Asty loved to fly. She was a World War II pilot who last year at 99 years old became the world's oldest flight instructor.
In the 1970s, she began her transition and has lived as a woman ever since. She was especially close to her grandson, Eric Hummel.
Robina was just such a great life coach, and as Robina would say, she's seen it all, and she really had.
They stamp making, so literally, as you were saying, like a mini United Nations, they actually created their own stamps as if they were a separate nation from the rest of the world. Again, one of the most fascinating things is that they came from countries that were, you know, in conflict with each other during the Cold War, but those barriers completely broke down.
Right. It's interesting that what you say about stamps. They had their own stamps. The Egyptian government came to recognize those stamps as being, I guess, a form of legitimate postage. And when you talk about the exchange of crews, my understanding is the Canadian government, they actually were instrumental in negotiating those crew exchanges, were they not?
Yes, that's right. In fact, for the British crews, there was the Canadian representative in Egypt who did take that on that very important role of helping to negotiate for them to depart. So yes, on the stamps though, let's just say, I mean, they weren't really officially recognised by postal authorities. I mean, they put the stamps on, and they were just beautifully decorative. They were an expression of art, you know, of people's feelings about being trapped there. And sometimes they did slip through without an additional stamp from Egypt or another country. But I think it was more creative in expression than a form of postage, really.
Again, with Kath Sanker, author of Stranded in the 6-Day War. There were 14 ships that were stranded in the Suez Canal for 8 years because Nasser decided during the There's a soccer pitch. They even held their own Olympics, did they not, with 14 events?
They did, and that just preceded the Mexico Olympics of 1968. And they thought, you know, we don't want to miss out on this major sporting event. And it was the Polish crew, there were two Polish ships who were the kind of brainchild behind this, and they set to work. You know, like you say, they already had a soccer pitch, but they made weights for the weightlifting contest. They had contests. They had high jump, and some of the crews had to lend their mattresses so that the guys would have a soft landing after the high jump. And I have an incredible photograph in my book of guys kind of right in the air doing the high jump and someone weightlifting with a kind of view of the Suez Canal in front of them. And sailing was a very, very popular sport, obviously being on the water, so sailing was part of the Olympics as well, and they had sprinting or kind of running races, a whole variety, and they made their own medals just from stuff they found around in the ships, and had a proper award ceremony with a podium and with a national anthem for the winner. So, it was actually very well publicised at the time internationally, and trophies were kind of donated. I know from the UK they kind of sent out trophies especially for the award winners. So it was quite something.
There was also a dog who won an Olympic medal. From which country or boat?
I don't know. The Brazil, the dog. Yeah, I found this anecdote about the dog, but I've never managed to find out much more about it, unfortunately. But they did have a certain amount of wildlife as pets, because, you know, again, people were there a long time. There were dogs, cats, rabbits, sort of all over the place on the ship, and apparently, purely anecdotally, the animals, just like the people, also got on very well.
Well, it's interesting that the people got along that well. I'm told some of the people have described that episode as the happiest time in their lives. Do they still stay in touch, some of the people who have survived?
Anytime somebody says that,
yes, I mean, it was.
maybe let's say things could be worse. He punched the guy and
Clearly, who
said
were there
that.
at the beginning, it was probably one of the most scary times
Try
of their
not to
lives,
tell
because
God
for those who
to
were
fuck you over
originally
again.
trapped was very different from those who came after his release
the
group,
best
who
time
just
of my
came and
life.
were able, you know, to take advantage of the social
You can play
interaction.
neither one, so
Although, having said that, there was always tension in the region and conflict, and, you know, there were sporadic bursts of fighting, so it wasn't all a kind of holiday, really. It was not without its dangers.
All the times you should have had a
Yes,
mutiny,
they
just
did
left.
stay in touch.
You
And
were in those
that's
boxes,
not
a fully
normal.
loaded
You know,
ship
just
enough
because,
time.
you know,
Something's gonna
you go on a
break.
voyage, you know, work with
You
somebody,
sink your
you
ship,
may
they
never
can't
see
just
them
leave you in
again
the water.
after that.
They can't drag that
But they
shit out
did,
without
because it was
they
so
gotta get
special
you out
to
of
them.
there.
It was such,
People are taking it
and the
ahead.
Great
Why would
British
you
Local
stay there?
Association,
Best
the
time of your
organisation
life.
that they
Fucking
formed,
drugs.
actually continued,
These were ships
and
full of
people
whiskey,
did
weren't they?
stay
One
in
of those
touch, and there
boats
were
was loaded
reunions
with rum and whiskey.
subsequently. And then what I realised was, with the advent of the internet, you know, sort of from the 90s onwards, it was a great way for people to get in touch with each other again and renew acquaintances. And that's really, I think, how the story has maintained itself and has, you know, sort of come to us today, because it, you know, people have got in touch and exchanged their memories and photographs and about what happened during that time.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story that you've documented. Just say as a postscript, it's also what spawned the super tankers like the Ever Given, because once the canal had been closed, a lot of people thought, geez, we can't be caught like that again. So when we're getting some...
Very much for having